Jack Anderson lives a simple life on his struggling farm, working from sunrise to sunset just to make ends meet. One morning, while checking his property's fence line, he discovers something that will change his life forever. A beautiful young woman chained to an old oak tree. She's Katherine Wells, the missing heiress to a billion-dollar fortune. But why was she left there, and who would want to harm someone from one of America's wealthiest families? When Jack frees her, he has no idea that this act of kindness will pull him into a world of secrets, danger, and unexpected love. Could this chance encounter between a humble farmer and a billionaire's daughter lead to something neither of them ever imagined possible? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The old farmall tractor sputtered to life in the pre-dawn darkness, its weathered red paint barely visible in the dim light of Jack Anderson's barn. It had been his father's pride and joy, bought second-hand in better days, when the Anderson farm had turned a modest profit. Now, like everything else on the 100-acre property, it ran on prayers and careful maintenance. Jack pulled his worn denim jacket tighter against the autumn chill. At 35, his face carried the weathered look of someone who'd spent too many years watching the sky for rain that didn't come. His hands, calloused and strong, guided the tractor with the familiarity born of countless mornings just like this one. The bank letter lay unopened on his kitchen table. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. 3 missed payments now, and the drought wasn't helping. The small farming community of Cedar Grove, Indiana, had seen better days, and Jack's farm wasn't the only one struggling. His nearest neighbor, old Tom Miller, had sold out to a corporate farming operation last spring. The offer had been generous. They always were at first, but Jack had seen how those stories ended. Family farms swallowed up, generations of history erased by industrial agriculture. Not happening, he muttered, checking the irrigation system that kept his remaining crops alive. The morning sun was starting to paint the horizon pink, revealing rows of corn that should have been taller by now. His father would have known what to do. James Anderson had been a true farmer, the kind who could read the soil like a book and predict rain by the way his knee ached. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Jack's coffee went cold beside a stack of unpaid bills. The house itself told the story of gradual decline. Faded wallpaper his mother had chosen 20 years ago, linoleum floor worn thin by decades of work boots. But it was clean, orderly. Jack's mother had taught him that much before cancer took her 5 years after his father's heart attack. The local diner's breakfast rush was in full swing when Jack stopped in for his weekly indulgence. 2 eggs over easy and endless cups of coffee. Mary, the waitress who'd known him since high school, slid a piece of pie onto his plate without being asked. "On the house," she said, her gray hair tucked beneath a practical hairnet. "You're looking too thin lately." "Mary, you can't keep—" "Don't tell me what I can't do in my own diner, Jack Anderson. Your mama was my best friend, and she'd haunt me if I let you waste away." The pie was apple, his favorite. Mary's small kindnesses were part of what kept him going, reminded him why he fought so hard to keep his land. Cedar Grove took care of its own, even if taking care sometimes meant looking the other way when someone couldn't pay their full tab at the feed store. Back at the farm, Jack walked his property line, checking fences that had stood for decades. The old oak tree marking the southeast corner had been there since his grandfather's time. Its sprawling branches had sheltered generations of Anderson children. Now it stood as a silent witness to the farm's struggles, its leaves beginning to turn gold with the changing season. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister Sarah in Indianapolis. "Big real estate developer looking at farms in your area. Call me." He deleted it without responding. Sarah meant well, but she'd left farm life behind for a real estate career in the city. She didn't understand that some things were worth more than money. As the sun climbed higher, Jack spotted movement. In the cornfield, deer again probably. He'd have to repair the fence near the creek, but that would have to wait. The irrigation pump was making a sound he didn't like, and without water nothing else mattered. The tool shed held his father's old toolbox, each implement worn smooth with use. Jack ran his fingers over the engraved J.A. on the box's lid. "What would you do, Dad?" he whispered. The tools offered no answers, but working with them brought a familiar comfort. By late afternoon, he'd fixed the pump, moved the cattle to fresh pasture, and started repairs on the barn roof. His shoulders ached, but there was satisfaction in physical work. The land might be struggling, but it was his. 3 generations of Andersons had worked this soil, and he'd be damned if he'd be the one to lose it. The evening brought a call from the bank. He let it go to voicemail. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face that reality. For now, he sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades his mother would have loved, sipping water from a mason jar and letting his mind wander to better days. He couldn't know that tomorrow would change everything, that his early morning fence check would lead him to a discovery that would shake his world to its foundations. For now, he was just a farmer, watching darkness settle over his land, preparing for another day of honest work and quiet struggle. The old farmall tractor sat silently in the barn, ready for another dawn. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pearl when Jack spotted the broken fence near the old oak tree. Strange, he'd checked this section just last week. Dew dampened his boots as he crossed the tall grass, tool belt jingling at his hip. Something wasn't right. The morning birds had gone quiet. Through the early mist he caught movement, a flash of pale blue against the tree's dark bark. His stride broke into a jog, then a run. The sight stopped him cold. A woman, probably in her late 20s, sat slumped against the massive oak. Heavy chains wrapped around her torso, securing her to the trunk. Her business suit, once expensive, was torn and dirt-stained. Dark hair fell forward, obscuring her face. "Ma'am?" Jack approached slowly, hands raised. "Can you hear me?" She jerked awake, eyes wide with fear. They were striking eyes, deep brown, intelligent and terrified. Her lips were cracked from dehydration. "Please," she whispered, voice hoarse. "They might come back." Jack was already moving, pulling his bolt cutters from his tool belt. "I'm going to get you out of here. I'm Jack Anderson. This is my farm." He kept talking, voice low and steady, like he would with a spooked horse. "You're safe now. Nobody's coming back while I'm here." The chains were heavy-duty, industrial grade. It took all his strength to cut through them. With each snap of metal, he caught glimpses of bruises on her wrists, angry red marks where she'd fought against her restraints. "I'm Katherine," she managed between shaking breaths. "Katherine Wells." The name hit him like a physical blow. Everyone in Indiana knew the Wells family. Their business empire stretched across the Midwest. Their heiress had vanished 2 weeks ago, spawning headlines and wild speculation. "I've got water in my truck," Jack said, focusing on immediate needs. "Can you walk?" She nodded, but her legs buckled when she tried to stand. Without hesitation, Jack scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and she was shivering despite the mild morning. "My father," she mumbled against his shoulder. "You can't call my father. Right now, let's just get you somewhere safe." Jack's mind was racing. The nearest hospital was 30 miles away, and something in Katherine's voice told him that might not be the best option. His truck sat where he'd left it by the fence line. He set her gently in the passenger seat, wrapped his jacket around her shoulders, and handed her his water bottle. "Small sips," he cautioned. Katherine's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the bottle. Dried blood stained her fingernails. She'd fought hard against whoever did this. "The farmhouse is just over that rise," Jack said, starting the engine. "It's not much, but it's secure. We can figure out our next move from there." She caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Why are you helping me?" Jack met her gaze. Despite everything she'd been through, there was still a fierce intelligence in those eyes. "Because it's right," he said simply. "And because nobody deserves what was done to you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the dirt. They're going to come looking for me. Let them try." Jack's voice was quiet but firm. "This is my land. Nobody comes here without my say-so." As they drove toward the farmhouse, Jack glanced in his rearview mirror. The old oak tree stood silent, broken chains dangling from its branches like some kind of grotesque wind chime. He had no idea what he was getting himself into, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt her again. Katherine had fallen into an exhausted sleep by the time they reached the house, her head resting against the window. In sleep, the fear smoothed from her face, revealing the young woman beneath the trauma. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter, anger burning in his chest at whoever had done this. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another scorching day. But for Jack Anderson, everything had changed. His world of quiet struggles and simple problems had just become infinitely more complicated, and he wouldn't have it any other way. The farmhouse kitchen looked different through a stranger's eyes. Jack noticed every crack in the linoleum, every worn spot on the counter as he helped Katherine into a chair. She sank into it gratefully, still wrapped in his jacket, her eyes taking in her surroundings with wary attention. "First things first," Jack said, filling a glass with tap water. "Small sips like before. Then we'll see about cleaning up those cuts." Katherine's hands were steadier now as she took the glass. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was cultured, even rough with exhaustion. "I know this puts you in danger." Jack pulled his grandmother's quilt from the living room chair and draped it around her shoulders. "Let me worry about that. When's the last time you ate?" She shook her head slightly. I'm not sure. What day is it?" "Tuesday." Jack kept his voice neutral, but his jaw tightened. They'd kept her out there for days. The ancient electric stove clicked to life as Jack pulled out eggs and his mother's cast-iron skillet. "Protein first, then we'll see about the rest." His hands moved with practiced efficiency, cracking eggs into the pan while keeping Katherine in his peripheral vision. She watched him cook with an expression he couldn't quite read. "This all seems so normal," she said finally, "like a dream." After she stopped, her fingers clutching the quilt tighter. "You don't have to talk about it," Jack said, sliding perfectly cooked eggs onto a plate. "Not until you're ready." The food seemed to revive her somewhat. Color returned to her cheeks as she ate, though her movements remained careful, measured. Jack noticed how she positioned herself to keep the door and windows in view. "The bathroom's down the hall," he said when she'd finished. "There's a first aid kit under the sink. Clean towels in the cabinet. Take all the time you need." Katherine stood shakily. "I won't be long. Take as long as you want. Nobody comes up this road without me seeing them first." While the shower ran, Jack moved quickly through the house. He checked locks, drew curtains, and brought his shotgun down from its rack. The weapon was old, like everything else he owned, but well-maintained. He hoped he wouldn't need it. Katherine emerged 40 minutes later, wearing an old flannel shirt and jeans Jack had left out for her. They hung loose on her frame, but she looked more like herself. She'd finger-combed her wet hair, and without the dirt and tear streaks, he could see why her disappearance had dominated news cycles. "The clothes belonged to my sister," Jack explained. "She left some things here last time she visited." "They're perfect." Katherine sank back into the kitchen chair. "I know you must have questions." Jack poured them both coffee. "Only one that matters right now. Do you feel safe enough to rest? There's a spare bedroom upstairs, clean sheets on the bed." Tears welled in her eyes again. "Why aren't you asking who did this? Why they did it? Whether I'm putting you in danger just by being here? Because you're exhausted, because you've been through hell, and because sometimes people just need a safe place to land." He pushed the coffee closer to her. "The rest can wait." A small sob escaped her. "I haven't felt safe in so long." "You're safe now." Jack's voice carried absolute conviction. "Whatever's coming, we'll handle it. But first, you need to sleep." He showed her to the spare room, where his mother's old dresser still held sachet packets in its drawers, filling the air with the faint scent of lavender. Katherine paused in the doorway. "Jack?" Her voice was small. "Thank you, not just for helping me, but for for making this feel normal. For the eggs and coffee and clean towels. I thought I'd forgotten what normal felt like. Get some rest, Katherine. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. Back in the kitchen, Jack finally allowed himself to fully process the morning's events. The heiress to the Wells fortune was sleeping in his spare room, running from something that had her terrified enough to stay silent rather than call for help. He'd inherited his father's beliefs about right and wrong, about helping those in need, but he'd also inherited his mother's fierce protective streak. Whatever storm was coming, he'd face it. For now, he had fences to mend and a farm to run, and a sleeping woman to protect. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the kitchen when Katherine finally came downstairs. She moved more steadily now, though exhaustion still lined her face. Jack looked up from his bills, quickly shuffling them aside. "There's soup on the stove," he said. "Nothing fancy, but it's hot." She ladled herself a bowl, then hesitated before sitting. "I saw the newspaper in the bedroom." On the counter lay the Indianapolis Star, its headline glaring, "Wells heiress still missing, foul play suspected." Katherine's photo dominated the page, a corporate headshot showing a polished young executive with confident eyes and a precise smile. "I need to tell you everything," she said quietly. "You deserve to know what I've brought to your door." Jack pushed aside his coffee cup. "I'm listening." 2 weeks ago, I was Chief Financial Officer of Wells Enterprises. Her voice took on a mechanical quality, as if she'd rehearsed this. "My father built the company from nothing. Agricultural processing, grain storage, shipping logistics. We're worth billions now. At least, that's what the books show." She stirred her soup absently. "I found discrepancies in our accounts. Small at first, easy to miss, but they added up. Someone was laundering money through our grain terminals, hundreds of millions of dollars." "Your father?" Katherine shook her head. "My Uncle Robert, Dad's half-brother. He's been running operations since Dad's stroke last year. When I confronted him," she swallowed hard, "he laughed, said Dad had always been too straight-laced, too concerned with legacy instead of profit. The cartels paid well for their services." Jack's hands tightened on his coffee cup. "Drug money and weapons. Anything that needed to disappear into legitimate shipping manifests." Katherine's voice cracked. "I had proof, account numbers, shipping records, everything. I was going to take it to the FBI, but someone in the company must have warned him." She pulled a worn leather wallet from her borrowed jeans. From it, she extracted a small memory card. "Everything's here, the whole operation. But I can't." Her hands started shaking. "I can't go to the authorities. Robert has people everywhere. The local police, state government. I don't know how. Deep it goes." Jack reached across the table, steadying her trembling hands with his own. Her fingers were soft against his calloused palm. "Start at the beginning," he said gently. "The whole story." Over the next hour, Katherine's tale unfolded. The decades-old family rift between her father and uncle. Robert's gradual accumulation of power within the company. The way he'd positioned himself as the dedicated caretaker after her father's stroke, while systematically corrupting everything her family had built. "They grabbed me from the parking garage," she said. "Robert's men. They wanted the memory card, but I'd hidden it. She touched her wrist where the chain marks were still visible. "They tried to make me tell them. The oak tree," Jack said. "Why there? A message to my father. That tree. It's on all our corporate letterhead. The Wells family oak. Some story about my great-grandfather signing his first contracts under an oak tree." Her laugh was bitter. "Robert thought it was poetic, letting his men keep me there until I broke." Jack stood abruptly, moving to the window. The sun was setting now, painting the fields gold. "They'll be looking for you." "Yes." Katherine's voice was small. "I should leave. I've already put you in too much danger." "No." Jack's response was immediate. "Running alone is exactly what they want. Together we have a better chance." She stared at him. "Why would you risk everything for a stranger?" Jack turned from the window, his expression resolute. "Because 18 years ago, My father stood up to a corporate farming operation that was trying to force him out. They burned our south barn. Everyone knew who did it, but nobody would testify. The only reason we survived was because our neighbors stood with us, brought us lumber, helped rebuild, showed us we weren't alone. He met her eyes. Sometimes standing up is all we have, and nobody should have to stand alone. Katherine looked down at the memory card, then back at Jack. In his worn flannel shirt and faded jeans, he was everything her world was not. Honest, direct, unambiguously good. "So what do we do?" she asked. "First, we get that information somewhere. Safe? Then we find someone we can trust, someone outside your uncle's reach." Jack's voice held the same quiet certainty he brought to everything. "But tonight you rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough." Outside, the old oak tree stood sentinel in the gathering dusk. Its branches, which had witnessed both cruelty and kindness, swayed gently in the evening breeze, nature's indifferent witness to the storms of human lives. Morning arrived with the sound of chickens clucking in the yard. Katherine woke disoriented, then remembered where she was. The spare bedroom felt different in daylight, more real, less like a refuge from a nightmare. Through the window, she could see Jack in the yard, collecting eggs from the henhouse. She made her way downstairs, drawn by the smell of coffee. The kitchen was spotless. No trace of yesterday's conversations remained. Only the Indianapolis Star on the counter served, as a reminder that she wasn't living in some strange dream. The screen door creaked, and Jack entered with a basket of fresh eggs. He paused when he saw her, then smiled. "Good morning. Sleep okay?" "Better than I have in weeks." She watched as he moved naturally through his morning routine, setting eggs in a bowl, starting breakfast without asking if she wanted any. There was something comforting about his quiet certainty. "I can help," she offered, stepping closer to the stove. I don't know much about cooking, but I can learn." Jack handed her a spatula. "Eggs are a good place to start. Nothing fancy, just keep them moving until they look right." She concentrated on the task, aware of him moving around the kitchen behind her. The domesticity of the moment struck her as surreal. Here she was, Katherine Wells, Yale MBA, making scrambled eggs in a farmhouse kitchen, while billions of dollars in criminal evidence sat in her borrowed jeans pocket. "They're burning," Jack said mildly. "Oh!" She quickly moved the pan off the heat, cheeks flushing. "Sorry, I was thinking about—" "Hey!" His hand touched her shoulder briefly. "They're just eggs. We'll make more." The simple kindness in his voice almost undid her. She turned to face him, spatula still in hand. "How do you do that? Make everything seem so manageable." "Practice." He took the spatula gently, scraping the slightly blackened eggs onto 2 plates. "Farm life teaches you to handle what's in front of you. Tomorrow's problems will come. Soon enough." They ate at the kitchen table, morning sun streaming through windows that needed washing. Katherine found herself studying Jack's hands, strong, capable hands that could both break chains and handle eggs with care. "Show me," she said suddenly. "Show me how to do something useful." Jack looked up, understanding in his eyes. The garden needs weeding. That's how Katherine Wells, corporate heiress, found herself kneeling in dirt, learning to tell vegetables from weeds. Jack worked beside her, explaining patiently why some green things stayed and others had to go. The sun warmed her back, and gradually the knot of tension in her chest began to loosen. "It's about roots," Jack was saying, showing her how to grip close to the ground. "Pull too high and the weed breaks. You have to get down to where it starts." Like corporate corruption, she thought. Like family betrayal. Her hands sank deeper into the warm earth. They worked in companionable silence until Jack stood stretching. "That's enough for now. Don't want your hands too sore to hold a coffee cup tomorrow." Katherine looked at her dirt-stained fingers, the broken nails she'd once kept perfectly, manicured. "Thank you for manual labor, for treating me like a person, not an heiress, not a victim, just someone who needed to learn about weeds." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the morning air. Jack cleared his throat. Well, there's plenty more to learn, if you're interested. Farms full of lessons. Later, as afternoon shadows lengthened, Katherine found herself gathering eggs. On her own, each warm oval felt like a small miracle in her hands. Through the barn door, she could see Jack fixing a tractor part, his movements sure and practiced. She thought about boardrooms and balance sheets, about power lunches and corporate jets. Nothing in that world had felt as real as this. Earth under her nails, eggs in her basket, and a man who asked nothing of her except what she was willing to give. The memory card weighed heavy in her pocket, its secrets waiting to shatter this fragile piece. But for now, just for this moment, Katherine let herself sink into the simple rhythm of farm life, where problems could be solved with patience and honest work, and where trust grew as naturally as the vegetables in Jack's garden. The black SUV appeared at the end of Jack's driveway, like a thundercloud on a clear day. Katherine spotted it first from the kitchen window, her hand freezing mid-wash over breakfast dishes. "Jack!" He was already moving, his body tensing as he assessed the situation. "Back door. If anything happens, take my truck. Keys are—" "I'm not leaving you." The firmness in her voice surprised them both. The SUV crawled up the gravel drive, dust billowing behind it. Two men in dark suits emerged, their stance and movement screaming law enforcement. "Ms. Wells," the taller agent called out, holding up a badge. "FBI, we'd like to talk." Jack stepped onto his porch, positioning himself between the agents and his front door. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "Agent Phillips, FBI." The badge gleamed in the morning sun. "We're following up on a missing persons case." "Mind if we come in?" Katherine's hand found Jack's arm, squeezing once before she stepped forward. "I'm Katherine Wells, and I'm not missing." The agents exchanged glances. The shorter one, Agent Morris, according to his badge, pulled out a notebook. "Your family's been very concerned, Ms. Wells. Your Uncle Robert has been particularly vocal about finding you." Katherine's fingers dug into Jack's arm. "I'm sure he has. Mind telling us why the Wells heiress is hiding out on a farm in the middle of nowhere?" Phillips asked, his eyes scanning the property with professional interest. "I needed some time away." Katherine's voice was steady. "To think about certain business matters, like the allegations you made against your uncle." Morris's pen hovered over his notebook. "Serious accusations, Ms. Wells. Mr. Robert Wells has been very cooperative with our preliminary investigation. Even opened the company books." "I bet he has," Katherine murmured. Jack cleared his throat. "Seems to me if Ms. Wells isn't missing and no crime's been committed here, we're done." Phillips smiled without warmth. "Not quite. We'll need you to come with us, Ms. Wells, just to clear things up." "She's not going anywhere." Jack's voice was quiet but firm. "Harboring a person of interest in an ongoing investigation is a serious matter, Mr. Anderson, and I'm not harboring anyone. Ms. Wells is a guest on my property." The tension crackled like static before a storm. Then Katherine stepped forward, her chin high. "I'll make a statement, but only through my lawyer. I assume you have contact information for Gloria Chen." The agent's expressions flickered. Gloria Chen's reputation as a ruthless corporate lawyer was well known. "We'll be in touch." Phillips handed Katherine his card. "Don't leave the state." They watched the SUV disappear down the drive. Once it was gone, Katherine's composure crumbled. She sank onto the porch steps, shaking. "They're his," she whispered. "Robert has someone inside the FBI. Did you see how they emphasized his cooperation? How they dismissed my accusations?" Jack sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Then we don't trust the FBI. We find another way. The memory card. We need to move it, somewhere they won't look." Jack nodded slowly. "I might know a place, but first—" He stood, offering her his hand. "We need to make you less visible. Those suits will be back, and next time they'll bring more than badges." Katherine took his hand, letting him pull her up. Their fingers lingered together longer than necessary. "What did you have in mind?" "Well," Jack's lips curved slightly, "how do you feel about getting your hands dirty again?" An hour later, Katherine Wells, corporate heiress, was learning to drive a tractor. Her designer watch was tucked away in a drawer, replaced by an old baseball cap of Jack's. From a distance, she looked like any other farmhand. But as Jack watched her navigate the old farmel through the south field, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The agent's visit had shattered their bubble of safety, reminding them that the real world, with all its dangers and complications, was closing in. The memory card felt heavy in his pocket, where Katherine had pressed it before climbing onto the tractor. Trust. Freely given. He wouldn't waste it. The USB drive glowed faintly in the dim light of Jack's old desktop computer, its contents flowing across the screen in endless columns of numbers. Katherine stood behind his chair, one hand resting on his shoulder as she explained. "See these? Shipping manifests? They're perfect, too perfect. Every number exactly matching the projected yields, down to the decimal point. In real agriculture, nothing's that precise," Jack finished. "Drought, pests, weather, there's always variation." "Exactly. These aren't grain shipments. They're cover for something else." Her finger traced across the screen. "Each of these surplus shipments is actually drug money." Jack leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Using grain terminals to clean cartel cash. Clever." Katherine's grip tightened on his shoulder. "There's more. Look at the ownership patterns of the farms they're acquiring." More documents filled the screen. Property deeds, bank transfers, foreclosure notices. A pattern emerged. Family farms, bought under duress, always by different shell companies, all leading back to one holding corporation. "They're building an empire," Katherine said softly, "not just for money laundering. They're taking control of the entire agricultural supply chain. If they succeed, they could control food prices across the Midwest." Jack's voice was grim. "Crushing any independent farmers who refuse to sell." A sound outside made them both freeze. Just a raccoon knocking over the trash can, but Katherine's heart was racing, and Jack's hand had moved instinctively toward the shotgun propped nearby. "We need help," she said. "Someone who can't be bought." Jack turned to face her. Their faces close in the computer's blue glow. "I might know someone, old friend of my father's. Retired FBI agent who never lost his moral compass. Lives about 2 hours north. Can we trust him? Dad did, with his life, once." Jack stood, pocketing the USB drive. "But we can't call, not after today's visit." Katherine nodded, understanding. "When do we leave?" "Dawn. Less chance of being spotted." He touched her arm gently. "Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day." But sleep proved elusive. Katherine found herself in the kitchen at midnight, staring out at the moonlit fields. Jack's quiet footsteps behind her were becoming familiar. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Been thinking about what you said, about controlling the food supply." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "My great-grandfather used to say that whoever controls the land controls the future." He was right. Katherine turned to face him. "That's what makes this so dangerous. It's not just about drugs or money anymore. It's about power. Real power. Your uncle probably didn't start this. He's just a willing participant. The perfect frontman, respected business leader, grieving brother caring for his 6 siblings' company." Her laugh was bitter. "I should have seen it sooner." Jack's hand found hers in the darkness. "You saw it when it mattered." The touch was simple, grounding. Katherine looked down at their joined hands, his rough with honest work, hers still showing traces of her corporate life. "Jack," she hesitated, "if this goes wrong, I need you to know that these past few days, despite everything, I've felt more alive than I have in years." "Nothing's going wrong." His voice was firm. "We have the evidence. We'll find the right people to act on it." And then he trailed off, the unspoken question hanging between them. What then? When the danger passed, when justice was served, what would become of this fragile thing growing between a farmer and an heiress? A sudden flash of headlights on the distant road made them step apart. Just a passing car, but the spell was broken. "Dawn comes early," Jack said softly. "We should try to rest." Katherine nodded, but neither moved. In the moonlight, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the sleeping farm, they stood together, Two people from different worlds, united by truth and trust, and something else neither dared to name yet. The USB drive in Jack's pocket held enough, evidence to shake the foundations of power in the Midwest. But here, in this quiet midnight moment, an even more dangerous truth was taking root. Sometimes the greatest conspiracies aren't about money or power, but about hearts finding their way home in unexpected places. Dawn painted the farm in shades of possibility. Katherine stood in the garden, morning dew soaking her borrowed work boots as she harvested tomatoes for their journey. Each ripe fruit felt like a small triumph, life continuing despite the chaos swirling around them. "You're getting good at that," Jack said, approaching with two steaming coffee mugs. "Knowing which ones are ready." "They tell you," Katherine replied, surprising herself. "If you pay attention, like reading financial reports, just more honest." He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing. The coffee was strong and sweet, just how she'd come to like it. So different from her old almond milk lattes that cost more than an hour of minimum wage work. "We have time before we leave," Jack said. "Want to help with morning chores?" She nodded, following him to the chicken coop. The hens knew her now, didn't scatter when she reached under them for eggs. One, a speckled brown hen she'd named Grace, even pecked affectionately at her sleeve. "I used to think simple meant easy," Katherine said, gathering eggs in her basket. "Board meetings, corporate strategy, that was what I thought of as challenging work." Jack leaned against the coop door, watching her. "And now I know better. There's nothing simple about this life. It's complex in ways I never understood. Every decision matters. Every action has real consequences." She straightened up, basket full. The morning sun caught her face, highlighting changes even she hadn't noticed. Her skin slightly tanned, her expressions more open, her movements more sure. "Remember my first egg collection?" she asked, laughing. "I was terrified of the chickens. You were brave enough to try." Jack's voice was soft. "That's what counts." They moved to the barn next, where the two workhorses needed feeding. Katherine measured out grain with practiced ease, remembering Jack's lessons about portions and timing. The horses' soft nickers of greeting felt like acceptance. "In my old life," she said, stroking the mare's velvet nose, "everything was about the next quarter's projections, the next big deal. Nobody ever just was. We were always becoming something else, chasing the next level. And here, being present is enough, more than enough." She turned to face him. "Even with everything hanging over us, I feel more real than I ever did in that glass tower." Jack checked his watch. "We should head in. Need to pack before we go." But Katherine lingered, running her hand along the barn's rough wooden walls. "Jack, after this is over, after we find your father's friend, and deal with the evidence." "Katherine, no. Let me finish. I need you to know that this," she gestured at the barn, the fields beyond, the whole farm. "This isn't just a hiding place for me anymore. It's become something else, something real." The morning light played across Jack's face as he studied her. In her borrowed flannel and work boots, smelling of hay and honest work, she was nothing like the polished heiress from the newspaper photo. She was more. "Come on," he said finally, his voice rough with something unspoken. "We've got a long drive ahead." They walked back to the house together, close but not touching. Around them, the farm was waking up, birds calling, crops rustling in the morning breeze, life continuing its ancient rhythms. In the kitchen, Katherine packed sandwiches while Jack gathered what they'd need for the drive. Her movements were confident now, knowing where everything belonged. This kitchen had become more home to her than her luxury apartment ever was. "Ready?" Jack asked from the doorway. Katherine took one last look around, at the worn counters where she'd learned to cook, the window where she'd first spotted the FBI agents, the table where she'd shared her darkest secrets and found only acceptance. "Ready," she said, and meant it. Whatever came next, she wasn't the same woman who'd been chained to that oak tree. She was stronger now, rooted in something real. Like the vegetables in their garden, she had grown toward the light. The letter arrived just as they were loading the truck, Plain white envelope, no return address, delivered by hand. Jack found it tucked under his windshield wiper. His hands tensed as he read it, jaw tightening. Katherine watched his expression change. What is it? He handed her the letter wordlessly. The message was simple, typed in clean block letters. Some things should stay buried. Walk away now, or we'll bury more than secrets. Ask your father about the fire 18 years ago. The barn fire, Katherine whispered. The one you told me about. Jack was already scanning the tree line, the distant road. They've been watching, probably since the FBI visit. We can't stay here. No. He crumpled the letter, shoving it into his pocket. But we're not running either. Get in the truck. They drove in tense silence, taking back roads toward the highway. Katherine noticed how Jack checked the rear view mirror every few minutes, how his hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. Talk to me, she said softly. About the fire. Jack's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. It wasn't just the barn. They poisoned our well first. Killed half. Our livestock. Made it look like accidents. His knuckles whitened on the wheel. Dad knew who did it but couldn't prove it. The company wanted our land for a grain terminal. What happened? The community rallied. Neighbors helped rebuild, shared their water. The company backed off when they realized they couldn't break. Us? He glanced at her. That's what they don't understand about farmers. We're stronger together. A black SUV appeared in the distance, heading toward them. Katherine's breath caught. Jack, I see it. His voice was calm, but his eyes narrowed. Could be nothing. The SUV grew larger, its windows tinted dark. Jack's hand moved closer to the shotgun tucked beside his seat. As they passed each other, Katherine caught a glimpse of suited men inside. Not the same FBI agents from before. These men sat differently, carried themselves like soldiers rather than law enforcement. They're turning around, she said, watching the rearview mirror. Jack nodded, taking the next turn sharply. Hold on. What followed was a lesson in rural evasion. Jack guided the truck down maintenance roads, through old cattle paths, eventually emerging on a different highway entirely. The SUV never reappeared, but the message was clear. They were being hunted. We need to warn your father's friend, Katherine said when they finally stopped for gas. They might get there first. Already done. Jack pulled out an ancient flip phone, not his usual cell. Called from a burner while you were in the restroom. He's expecting trouble. Katherine touched his arm. You've done this before. Dad taught me. After the fire, he filled the truck's tank, eyes constantly moving. Always have a backup plan. Always know your ground and never trust a suit in the country. That earned her a small smile. Something like that. Back on the road, Katherine opened the lunch she'd packed. Simple sandwiches cut straight across. She handed one to Jack. My uncle, she said quietly, he won't stop. Even if we get the evidence out, he'll keep coming. Men like him, they don't know how to lose. Men like him also don't understand people like us. Jack took a bite of his sandwich, chewed thoughtfully. They think everyone has a price, that loyalty can be bought and sold like stocks. Us. Katherine's heart skipped at the word. Jack's eyes stayed on the road, but his free hand found hers. Us. The moment was broken by the sound of his burner phone. The number was blocked. Speaker, Katherine said. We face it together, Jack answered. A familiar voice filled the truck's cab. Robert Wells, smooth as aged whiskey. Jackie boy, her uncle drawled. Taking my niece on a little road trip? Mr. Wells. Jack's voice gave nothing away. Let's be civilized about this. Katherine's confused, stressed, making wild accusations. Come back now. We'll sort this out like family. Katherine's hand tightened on Jack's. Actually, sir, Jack's tone was perfectly polite, pure farm boy respect. I think we'll keep driving, but you... Have a nice day now. He hung up, tossing the phone onto the dashboard. He'll try the carrot first, then the stick. We've got about 2 hours before he realizes we're not turning around, Katherine calculated. Maybe less if he's tracking the burner phone. Jack pulled over, grabbed the phone, and tossed it into a passing grain truck. Then we'd better make them count. Sheriff Emma Martinez drummed her fingers on her worn oak desk, studying the badge that had been her father's before her. 20 years of serving Cedar Grove had taught her to trust her instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming. "Run that by me again," she said to her deputy. "2 FBI visits in 1 week?" "Different agents each time," Deputy Chen confirmed. "Second group didn't check in with us. Protocol says they should have." Emma's eyes narrowed. In small farming communities, strangers stood out, especially strangers asking questions about Jack Anderson. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mary at the diner. Men in suits, asking about Jack. Not the friendly kind. Emma stood, clipping her badge to her belt. "Get me everything we have on Wells Enterprises. And Tom, call your cousin at the state police, the one who owes me for that business last summer." Outside, Cedar Grove was waking up. Emma noticed 3 unfamiliar vehicles parked along Main Street, out of state plates. Men trying too hard to look casual. She pulled out her personal cell, dialing a number from memory. "Sarah? It's Emma. That favor you owe your brother, time to pay up." By noon, the pieces were falling into place. Sarah Anderson's real estate connections had unearthed a pattern of aggressive farm acquisitions. Tom's cousin had flagged unusual traffic stops near grain terminals. And Mary, bless her, had accidentally overheard the suits' phone conversations while refilling their coffee. "Sheriff?" Deputy Chen appeared in her doorway. "Got a call from Pete Miller. Says he saw Jack's truck headed north on County Road 8, and he saw something else, black SUV following, keeping its distance." Emma checked her weapon, then grabbed her keys. Time to return an old favor. She remembered the barn fire 18 years ago. She'd been a rookie deputy then, watching, helplessly as politics and money buried the investigation. Not this time, her radio crackled. "Sheriff got Bill Cooper on the line. Says he just rented his cabin to a young couple, paid cash." Emma smiled. Bill's hunting cabin was where she and Jack used to hide as teenagers when they skipped school. Some things you never forgot. "Tell Bill to sit tight and get me Jack's father's old FBI contact, the one who came to the funeral." The pieces were moving now. Throughout Cedar Grove, doors were closing to strangers asking questions. Farmers reported suspicious vehicles accidentally blocking back roads. The community was circling the wagons, protecting their own. Emma's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Sheriff Martinez." "Sheriff," a woman's voice, cultured but tired. "My name is Katherine Wells. Jack said we could trust you." "He's right." Emma pulled over, killing the engine. "But trust goes both ways. I need to know what we're dealing with." Catherine's story spilled out: corruption, threats, betrayal. When she finished, Emma sat in silence for a moment. "The suits in town," she said finally. "They're not FBI, are they?" "No." Catherine's voice was grim. "My uncle's men, ex-military probably. They're coming up behind you now," Emma cut in, starting her engine. 2 vehicles trying to be subtle. Good thing Cedar Grove deputies are doing road work on County Road 8. Might take hours to clear. She heard Katherine relay this to Jack, heard his soft chuckle. "Emma," Jack's voice now, "just like old times?" "Better." She pulled onto the road. "This time I've got a badge and backup. Real FBI's been notified, the kind that can't be bought. They're moving on the terminals tonight. Be careful," Jack warned. "Robert Wells has people everywhere." "So do we," Emma replied. "Every farmer from here to the state line knows your truck." "Know what happens when you mess with a farming community, Jack? The community fights back." "Damn right." She spotted the SUVs ahead, trapped behind old Pete's combine, doing a stately 5 miles per hour. "You two focus on getting that evidence somewhere safe. Let us handle the rest." After disconnecting, Emma watched the SUVs try to pass the combine, only to find Deputy Chen's cruiser conveniently blocking the other lane. Small-town life had its advantages, like knowing every back road, every farmer, every trick for slowing down unwanted visitors. Her radio crackled again, Mary's voice unusually gleeful. "Sheriff, those nice men in suits just found their tires mysteriously flat. All 8 of them. Must be something in the water." Emma touched her father's badge, remembering his words. Sometimes justice needs a little help from its friends. Copy that, she said, smiling. Send Pete my thanks. Breaking news alerts lit up phones across the Midwest. The Chicago Tribune headline blazed, Wells Enterprises Scandal, Grain Empire linked to international drug cartel. Katherine watched the notifications flood her burner phone screen, her hands steady as she held it. They sat in Jack's father's friend's study, a book-lined room in a remote farmhouse. Former FBI agent David Connor hadn't changed much in 18 years, still razor-sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, still radiating. Quiet authority. It's done, he said, closing his laptop. Every major news outlet has the story. The evidence is being examined by 3 separate federal task forces, and most importantly, he smiled grimly, it's all perfectly legal. Every document, every transaction record, properly obtained and authenticated. Jack stood by the window, watching the perimeter. Robert, arrested 20 minutes ago, David confirmed, along with his top executives. The raids are still ongoing at Wells facilities, across 6 states. Katherine's phone buzzed again, a secure message from Gloria Chen. Board of Directors calling emergency meeting. Your father's doctors cleared him to attend. It's time. She showed the message to Jack. His hand found her shoulder, squeezed, gently. The cartel angle was clever, David continued, removing his glasses to clean them. Once that connection was established, federal authorities couldn't ignore it. Drug enforcement takes precedence over corporate fraud. They'll try to bury it, Katherine said. Claim it was all Robert, that the company knew nothing. Let them try. David replaced his glasses, looking remarkably pleased. We have emails, board meeting minutes, money trails, and... He paused for effect. 3 mid-level managers who've agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Jack turned from the window. The farms, the ones they forced into selling, already being investigated by the state attorney general. Early findings suggest systematic fraud, environmental violations, and evidence of intentional crop damage. David's smile widened. Seems someone kept very detailed records. Katherine remembered the endless hours spent combing through corporate documents, tracking shell companies, following money trails. Robert always was obsessed with documentation. He thought it made him untouchable. Her phone buzzed again. A news alert showed Robert being led from the Wells corporate headquarters in handcuffs, his perfectly tailored suit incongruous against the restraints. Initial reports suggest losses exceeding $2 billion, David said. Stock's already dropping, but that's not the real story, is it? Katherine met his eyes. No. The real story is the farms, the families, the communities they tried to destroy. Speaking of which, David handed her a thick folder. Preliminary evidence suggests Wells Enterprises has been systematically undervaluing agricultural properties before acquisition. The FBI's forensic accountants are particularly interested in the fire insurance claims. Jack's head snapped up. The barn fires. 7 cases across 3 states, all remarkably similar, all involving farms that initially refused to sell. David's voice hardened. We're not just talking corporate fraud anymore. This is organized criminal activity. Katherine opened the folder, her CFO's training taking over as she scanned the documents. They'll lose everything, the terminals, the shipping contracts, the processing facilities. Good, Jack said quietly. A commotion outside drew their attention. David checked his security feed. Local news vans, they found us. Katherine stood, smoothing her borrowed flannel shirt. I should make a statement. The board will be watching. You don't have to, Jack said. Let the lawyers handle it. She touched his cheek gently. Yes, I do. This isn't just about corporate politics anymore. It's about right and wrong. You taught me that. David cleared his throat. There's a back entrance, and I have some clothes more suitable for a press conference if you'd like. But Katherine shook her head. No, let them see me like this. Let them see what really matters. She stepped onto the porch, Jack beside her. Camera lights blazed as reporters shouted questions. Katherine Wells, heir to a corporate empire, stood before them in work boots and flannel, looking more commanding than she ever had in designer suits. "My name is Katherine Wells," she began, her voice clear and strong, "and I have a story to tell you about corruption, courage, and the true meaning of value." Behind her, Jack watched with quiet pride as she laid bare the truth. Not just about corporate corruption, but about the strength found in honest work and loyal hearts. The headlines tomorrow would tell of billions lost and empires falling. But the real story, Jack knew, wasn't in the headlines. It was in the calluses on Katherine's hands, in the way she stood straighter now, in the truth they'd discovered together. That sometimes the richest soil is the kind that grows love instead of profit. The evening after the press conference, Katherine found Jack mending the fence where they'd first met. The old oak tree cast long shadows in the setting sun, its branches swaying gently in the autumn breeze. The broken chains had been removed, but the memory lingered. "Thought I'd find you here," she said, setting down 2 thermoses of coffee. Jack hammered another post into place. "Fence won't fix itself." She picked up a pair of work gloves, her own now, not borrowed, and started helping. They worked in comfortable silence, the rhythm of repair familiar to them both. "The board voted this morning," Katherine said finally. "Dad's resuming his position as chairman, with some help until he's stronger." Jack paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "And you? They want me as CEO." She laughed softly. "Can you imagine? Me? Running the company I helped break apart. You didn't break it, you saved it." Jack turned to face her. "The rot was already there. You just had the courage to cut it out." They moved to the next section of fence. Katherine handled the wire with practiced ease now, her movements sure and confident. "The forensic accountants found something interesting," she said. "Remember that corporate farming operation that tried to buy your land last spring? Hard to forget. Shell Company, one of Robert's. They were planning to force you out just like the others." She secured the wire with perhaps more force than necessary. It would have started small. Contaminated water supply, mysterious equipment, failures. "Like father, like son," Jack said quietly, history repeating itself. Katherine touched the fresh wood of the fence post. "Not this time. We're setting up a foundation, using the recovered funds to help farming communities, legal aid, equipment grants, fair loan programs." "Sounds like something your father would support." "It was his idea, actually. He's different since the stroke, more focused on legacy than profits." She smiled. "He wants to meet you." Jack drove another post into the ground. "The farmer who helped his daughter take down a criminal empire? The man who reminded his daughter what real value looks like." The sun was nearly gone now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. They stood back, admiring their work. The fence stretched straight and true, stronger than before. "Dad's doctors say he'll need another month of recovery," Katherine said softly, "before he can handle full-time work." Jack waited, sensing there was more. "I thought maybe I could help here. During that month, learn more about real farming, not just corporate agriculture." She turned to face him. "If you're willing to teach me." The last light caught her face, showing how much she'd changed since that first morning. The polished corporate executive was still there, but tempered now by something deeper, an understanding of soil and seasons, of work that left honest calluses. "Could use the help," Jack said, his voice rough. "Farm's been neglected lately." "What with all the excitement?" Katherine stepped closer. "Just the farm." His hand found hers, work-roughened fingers intertwining. "No, not just the farm." Above them the old oak tree rustled its leaves, a witness to endings and beginnings. The broken chains were gone, but something stronger had taken their place. Trust, built one moment at a time, like mending a fence together. "We should head in," Jack said finally. "Early start tomorrow. Always is." Katherine gathered the tools, movements practiced now. "Mary's holding pie for us at the diner, said we deserve celebrating." They walked back together, shoulders touching. The farmhouse waited ahead, its windows warm with welcome. Inside, Bills still needed paying, work still needed planning, and the future held no guarantees. But the fence was mended, the truth was told, and sometimes, Katherine thought, that was enough of a foundation to build something real upon. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Katherine's tailored business suit against the backdrop of Jack's weathered barn. She stood in the doorway, phone pressed to her ear, looking simultaneously at home and out of place. "Yes, I understand. The shareholders' concerns," she was saying, her CEO voice firmly in place. "But our new ethical farming initiative isn't just good PR, it's good business." Jack continued his work on the tractor, pretending not to listen. But he couldn't help noticing how she unconsciously reached down to pat the farm dog, Max even, while discussing million-dollar decisions. "The board meeting's at 2, she said, ending the call. "I should change. I wouldn't want to shock the board with actual dirt on their CEO." Jack teased. She kicked off her heels, wiggling her stocking toes in the hay. "You should see their faces when I talk about crop rotation and soil chemistry. Apparently, a month on a farm makes me some kind of agricultural expert." "Dangerous knowledge," Jack said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Might actually have to treat farmers like people who know what they're doing." Katherine opened the small duffel bag she'd taken to keeping in the barn, complete with work clothes and boots. The old guard's having trouble adjusting. They don't understand why their CEO spends weekends pulling weeds instead of playing golf. "And what did you tell them? That I get my best thinking done in the garden." She emerged from behind a stall in jeans and a flannel shirt, looking more like herself. "Ready to check the irrigation system?" They walked the fields together, Katherine's trained eye now catching details she would have missed a month ago. She stopped at the edge of the cornfield, frowning. "The new pipes aren't matching the pressure of the old system," she said. "We're losing efficiency." "Been meaning to fix that," Jack admitted, "but with equipment costs, I could—" "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "We talked about this." She sighed. "It's just money, Jack. I have more than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. It's not about the money." He checked a coupling, adjusting it slightly. "This farm survived on its own for 3 generations. It'll survive on its own now." Katherine was quiet for a moment. "What about thriving? Doesn't it deserve a chance to do more than just survive?" Before Jack could answer, her phone buzzed. Again. The screen showed her father's face. "Hi, Dad. Yes, I'll be there. No, I don't need the car service to— Dad, I can drive myself." She rolled her eyes at Jack. "Yes, I remember how to drive in heels." After she hung up, Jack said, "He worries about you." "He's trying to understand." Katherine leaned against a fence post. "Yesterday, he asked me if you'd consider joining the board of the new foundation. Said we need people who actually understand farming." Jack stiffened. "Katherine, I know. I know. You're not a suit and tie man." She touched his arm. "But that's exactly why we need you. Someone who knows what these policies actually mean on the ground." A truck appeared on the distant road. Sarah, Jack's sister, right on schedule for their weekly visit. Katherine smiled. Speaking of worlds colliding, Sarah's real estate expertise had proved invaluable in tracking Robert's property schemes. Now she was helping design the foundation's land protection programs. She stepped out of her BMW, designer purse in one hand, folder of documents in the other. "You two look disgustingly domestic," she called out. "Ready to talk numbers?" They gathered around the kitchen table, the farmer, the CEO, and the realtor. Sarah spread out maps showing at-risk agricultural properties. Katherine took notes on her tablet while Jack pointed out water access issues. "This could work," Sarah said finally. "If we can get the banks to cooperate, they'll cooperate." Katherine's voice held her boardroom authority. After the Wells scandal, they're eager to show support for family farms. Jack watched them work. These two powerful women fighting to protect his way of life. One his sister, the other. What exactly? They hadn't put a name to it yet, this thing growing between them. "Jack!" Katherine's voice brought him back. "What do you think about the cooperative buying program?" He looked at her. Really looked at her. in her work clothes, discussing complex financial strategies, equally comfortable in both worlds. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe they didn't need to choose one world over the other. I think, he said slowly, that we might be onto something here. The Wells Enterprises boardroom hadn't changed. Still all mahogany and leather, still 40 stories above Chicago. But Katherine had. She felt it in the way she moved through the space, no longer intimidated by its calculated grandeur. Jack's quiet presence beside her, though he looked uncomfortable in his one good suit, gave her strength. "The numbers don't lie," she was saying, standing before the board. "Our ethical farming initiative has increased productivity by 28%. Small farms in our network are reporting record yields. Sentiment is all well and good." Bernard Matthews interrupted, his voice dripping condescension. "But this partnership model is inefficient. We need centralized control, like we had under Robert." Katherine's voice cut through his argument. "Should I pull up the forensic accountant's reports again?" Her father, looking frail but alert at the head of the table, smiled slightly. The stroke had taken some of his mobility, but none of his shrewd intelligence. "The fact remains," another board member started, these small operators, Jack spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but carrying authority, "feed this country, and they do it while protecting the land for future generations." Katherine clicked to the next slide. "Our pilot program in Cedar Grove shows a 17% increase in soil fertility, water usage down 12%, and because our stakeholders, not just contractors, they're innovating, developing new techniques." She moved through the data methodically: profit margins, sustainability metrics, community impact statistics. The board members shifted uncomfortably as their arguments crumbled against hard evidence. "Ms. Wells," Matthews tried again, "your personal involvement with certain agricultural elements might be clouding your judgment." The room temperature seemed to drop. Katherine's father straightened in his chair. "Choose your next words carefully, Bernie," he warned. But Katherine held up a hand. "No, Dad. Let's address this directly." She turned to Matthews. "You're referring to my relationship with Mr. Anderson, among other rustic choices you've made lately." Jack started to rise, but Katherine's hand on his shoulder stopped him. She smiled, the kind of smile that had preceded corporate takeovers. "Mr. Matthews, let me tell you about rustic choices." She pulled up a new slide. "This is your vacation house in Aspen, $3 million, purchased through a shell company that received loans from interesting sources during Robert's tenure." Matthews paled. "I learned a lot about following money trails recently," Katherine continued pleasantly. "Would you like to discuss what else I found, or shall we return to the quarterly projections?" The boardroom was silent. Her father's smile had grown wider. "Now then," Katherine resumed, "our next initiative involves modernizing irrigation systems across our partner farms. Mr. Anderson, would you walk us through the technical specifications?" Jack stood, his farmer's knowledge wrapped in carefully practiced corporate language. He spoke about water tables and soil composition, about combining traditional wisdom with modern efficiency. Despite their prejudices, the board members found themselves taking notes. By meeting's end, the initiative was approved. The old guard had been reminded that their new CEO hadn't just inherited her father's shares. She'd inherited his business instincts too, and added some sharp new ones of her own. In the elevator afterward, Jack loosened his tie. "Remind me never to play poker with you." Katherine laughed, the corporate mask falling away. "Matthews had it coming, but did you see their faces when you started talking about semiconductor-controlled irrigation systems? Probably the same face I made first time I saw you birth a calf." Her father was waiting in the lobby, leaning on his cane. "Jack!" he called out. "Walk with me a moment." Katherine watched them head toward the building's small garden area, the CEO who'd built an empire and the farmer who'd helped save it. Through the glass walls, she saw her father gesture expansively, saw Jack's posture gradually relax. Her phone buzzed. Sarah sending updates about the foundation's latest land acquisition. A struggling farm saved, a family's legacy preserved. The kind of profit that wouldn't show up on quarterly reports, but meant everything. The two men returned, both looking pleased. Her father kissed her cheek. "Keep him," he whispered. "He sees things we miss." Later, driving back to the farm with Chicago's skyline receding in the rearview mirror, Katherine felt the tension leave her shoulders. Jack reached over, took her hand. "Your father offered me a job," he said. "Executive position. Benefits, stock options, corner office." Katherine's heart skipped. "And?" "Told him I already had the best office in the world." He smiled. "Views better too." The highway rolled beneath them, carrying them home to where real wealth grew in. Fields under open skies. Katherine squeezed his hand, understanding completely. The farmhouse kitchen glowed with evening light as Katherine stirred a pot of her newly mastered beef stew. Through the window, she could see her sleek company car parked beside Jack's dusty truck, a sight that no longer seemed strange. "You're getting good at that," Jack said, coming in from the evening chores. He dropped a kiss on her shoulder as he passed, the gesture casual, natural. "Mary's recipe." Katherine smiled. "Though she swears I'm still not adding enough pepper." The kitchen. Table held an odd mix of papers. Corporate reports beside feed store receipts, foundation proposals next to seed catalogs. Their lives merged on this scarred wooden surface, neither world cancelling out the other. "Got an interesting call today," Jack said, washing up at the sink. "Developer wants to build one of those fancy farm-to-table restaurants on the edge of town. Says having a Wells Enterprises CEO living here makes Cedar Grove authentically rustic." Katherine laughed. "What did you tell them? That Cedar Grove was authentic long before I started dating a CEO?" He dried his hands, turned to face her. "Speaking of which," she recognized his serious tone, turned down the stove burner. "What is it?" "Your apartment. Lease in Chicago is up next month." "Yes." They hadn't discussed it, though the renewal notice had been sitting on the table for days. "Been thinking," Jack said carefully. "This house, it's too big for one person. Has been since Mom passed. And you're here most nights anyway." Katherine's heart quickened. "Jack Anderson, are you asking me to move in with you?" "Maybe." He looked around the kitchen, at the herbs she'd started growing in the window, her laptop charging in the corner, her favorite coffee mug in the dish. "Rack, unless you think it's too soon, or too rural, or too—" She crossed the kitchen and kissed him, effectively ending his list of concerns. "The commute will be hell," she said when they parted. "You could take the corporate helicopter." He teased. "Don't tempt me." She went back to her stew, but her mind was racing. "We'd need to make some changes. The office upstairs, already wired for high-speed internet. Sarah helped set it up last week, just in case." Katherine turned, surprised. "You planned this?" "Let's say I hoped." He pulled her away from the stove again, into the center of the kitchen. "Look, I know it's not a penthouse. And I know you're giving up—" "I'm not giving up anything," she interrupted. "I'm gaining everything." She gestured around them. "This kitchen, where we can cook together. That porch, where we can watch the sunset. A home that's real, not just a place to store designer clothes. Your father thinks I'm finally showing some sense." She smiled. "He says the land teaches us what matters." Jack's arms tightened around her. "Speaking of land, the back 40, already handled. The Foundation's Purchase Protection Program goes through next week. This farm won't ever be developed. You didn't tell me. Wanted it to be a surprise, call it a housewarming gift to myself." The stew began to bubble, demanding attention. They moved together naturally, Katherine stirring while Jack got bowls. The routine was familiar now, comfortable. "You know what this means," he said, setting the table. "You're really going to have to master Mary's pie crust recipe. One domestic challenge at a time." Katherine brought the pot to the table. "Besides, I thought you loved me for my corporate takeover skills." "Among other things." He pulled out her chair, not out of corporate politeness, but with the simple courtesy she'd come to cherish. They sat in their familiar places, Corporate princess and farming prince, sharing a meal in a kitchen that had seen 3 generations of Andersons. Now it would see something new, a future neither of them had imagined, but both had chosen. "So," Katherine said, passing the bread, "when do I get to start moving my stuff?" Jack's smile held all the warmth of harvest sunlight. "Whenever you're ready, CEO Wells. Whenever you're ready." The old oak tree had never seen a wedding quite like this. White chairs dotted the field beneath its branches, each decorated with wildflowers gathered by local children. Mary from the diner had organized an army of volunteers, transforming the sight of Katherine's darkest moment into something magical. "No, absolutely not," Katherine said into her phone, pacing the farmhouse porch. "No corporate sponsors, no press releases, and definitely no business magazine coverage." She paused, listening. "Because it's my wedding, not a shareholder event." Inside, her wedding dress hung beside her work boots, a simple design that had scandalized her father's personal shopper, but felt perfectly right. She'd found it in Cedar Grove's only boutique, the same place she now bought her flannel shirts. Sarah emerged from the house, carrying table settings. The Wall Street Journal called again. Apparently, billionaire heiress weds small-town farmer is quite the story. "They can write whatever they want," Katherine said, ending her call. After the wedding, the sound of tractors drew their attention. A convoy was coming down the road. Every farmer in 3 counties, it seemed, their machines freshly painted, pulling trailers decorated with flowers and lights. "Your wedding arch has arrived," Sarah announced. The lead tractor, driven by old Tom Miller, pulled up to the oak tree. On his trailer stood an arch made entirely of ancient farm tools, polished to a mirror shine. Plowshares and pitchforks curved gracefully upward, telling the story of generations of farm life. "It's perfect," Katherine breathed. "Wait till you see what else they're bringing," Sarah grinned. "These people really love you too." All day the community arrived with contributions. Women brought pies and casseroles, each carrying a family recipe older than the state itself. Men brought chairs, tables, and stories about Jack's father. Children ran everywhere, stringing lights through the trees. Sheriff Emma directed traffic, looking unusually festive in her dress uniform. The governor's security detail called. She told Katherine, told them the road's closed for a private event. "The governor's coming? Honey, you took down one of the biggest corporate corruption cases in state history. Half the government wants to come." Emma smiled. "Don't worry, we're keeping it small, just family." By family, Emma meant everyone who'd helped them during the crisis. The FBI agents who'd proven trustworthy, the farmers who'd blocked roads, the diner staff who'd eavesdropped on suspicious strangers. In Cedar Grove, family was defined by actions, not blood. Late afternoon found Katherine in her bedroom, Sarah helping with final preparations. Through the window came the sound of Jack's voice, directing the placement of tables. "Never thought I'd see my brother marry a billionaire," Sarah mused, arranging Katherine's hair. "Never thought I'd see a billionaire learn to drive a tractor either." "Former billionaire," Katherine corrected. "Most of the money's in the foundation now, which you still control, which we use to help people." Katherine touched the simple pearl necklace that had been Jack's mother's. "Besides, I've learned there are different kinds of wealth." A knock at the door revealed Katherine's father, steady on his cane. His eyes filled at the sight of his daughter. "You look like your mother," he said softly. Katherine hugged him carefully. "Thank you for understanding. About the small wedding, about all of it." "My dear, I've never understood you better." He touched her cheek. "You found what I found when I started this company. Something real to believe in." The sun was setting when Katherine finally walked toward the oak tree. The assembled crowd, a mix of corporate suits and farming clothes, stood as one. But Katherine saw only Jack, waiting under the arch of farming tools, looking somehow perfect in his new suit. She reached him just as the last sunlight caught the arch, making the old tools gleam like precious metals. Jack took her hands, his eyes saying everything his voice couldn't yet. A local judge conducted the ceremony, but the real weight came from the witnesses, hundreds of people who'd chosen right over easy, community over profit, love over fear. The rings, the judge announced. Mary stepped forward with a surprise. 2 bands fashioned from a single stalk of wheat dipped in gold. From the first crop you harvested together, she explained. As they exchanged rings, Katherine finally understood what true wealth meant. It wasn't in the corporate accounts or real estate holdings. It was here in this moment, surrounded by people who measured riches in trust and loyalty. "You may kiss the bride," the judge said, but they were already moving together, their lips meeting as the first stars appeared above the oak tree. The cheers that erupted were pure Cedar Grove, whistles and hollers mixing with polite corporate applause. 2 worlds, finally and perfectly merged. 1 year later, the old oak tree watched over a very different scene. Katherine Wells sat at its base, laptop balanced on her knees, conducting a virtual board meeting while a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves above. "Yes, the Foundation's agricultural grants are proceeding on schedule," she was saying. "We've helped 38 family farms modernize their operations this quarter alone." She paused, smiling as Jack's tractor rumbled past, their 8-month-old daughter, Sarah, waving excitedly from her special seat beside her father. The Wells Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture had become a model for corporate responsibility, though Katherine preferred to call it common sense. Their headquarters remained in Chicago, but its heart was here in Cedar Grove, where theory met practice in the rich soil of working farms. "Meeting adjourned," she concluded, closing her laptop. The corporate world could wait. It was harvest time. Jack pulled the tractor to a stop nearby. "Look who wanted to say hello to Mama," he called down, lifting their daughter. Little Sarah, named for her aunt, had her father's honest eyes and her mother's determined chin. She reached for Katherine with tiny hands, already dusty from helping on the farm. "There's my girl," Katherine said, taking her. "Teaching Daddy how to drive the tractor again." "She's a natural," Jack grinned. "Better listener than I ever was." The farm had flourished over the past year, though not in ways corporate analysts could easily measure. The fields produced bountifully, but their real harvest was in the lives they'd touched. Every week brought visitors, farmers seeking advice, students learning sustainable practices, even corporate executives trying to understand this new model of success. "Mary called," Jack said, climbing down. "Wants to know if we're still on for the Harvest Festival planning meeting." Katherine nodded, bouncing Sarah on her hip. "Wouldn't miss it, though I still think letting her teach me to make prize-winning pie is a lost cause. 7 attempts at the county fair say otherwise." He kissed them both. "You'll get there." The transformation of Cedar Grove had been subtle but profound. The Wells Foundation's presence brought jobs and opportunities. But more importantly, it brought hope. Young people were returning to farming, armed with both traditional wisdom and modern techniques. The diner now served locally grown organic produce, alongside Mary's famous meatloaf. Even Bernard Matthews had come around, after his grandson interned on their farm last summer. The boy had returned to his grandfather with dirty hands and clear eyes, talking about soil composition and sustainable yields with newfound passion. "Your father called," Jack said, taking Sarah back as Katherine stood. "Says the new board members are working out well. 3 farmers, 2 environmental scientists, and a rural sociology professor." Katherine brushed off her jeans. "Amazing. How much better decisions get when you have people who understand the real world." They walked together toward the house, their daughter pointing excitedly at butterflies. The farmhouse had evolved too. Solar panels on the roof, high-speed internet for Katherine's work, but still the same warm heart. The kitchen remained its soul, where business plans and farming schedules shared space with family meals and community gatherings. "Sheriff Emma's retiring next month," Jack mentioned. "Town's throwing her a parade. Well deserved. Though I hear she's already planning to run for state office." Katherine smiled. "Something about agricultural policy reform." They reached the porch, where Sarah's playpen sat next to Catherine's corporate awards. A perfect metaphor, she thought, for their balanced life. "Sometimes I wonder," she said, watching Jack settle their daughter with her toys, "what would have happened if you hadn't found me that morning?" He straightened, taking her hand. "You'd have saved yourself. You're strong enough." "Maybe, but I wouldn't have found this." She gestured at their life, the thriving farm, their happy child, the community they'd helped rebuild. Sometimes the worst moments lead us to the best places. The sound of approaching vehicles caught their attention. The afternoon tour group was arriving, young farmers enrolled in their sustainable agriculture program. Each would spend 6 months learning both traditional techniques and modern innovations, then return to their own communities as agents of change. "Ready to inspire the next generation?" Jack asked. Katherine looked at their daughter, playing contentedly in the shade of the porch. At the farm that had become a beacon of hope, at the man who had helped her find her true worth. "Always," she said. Above them the old oak tree stood tall against the autumn sky. Its branches, once bearing chains, now held wind chimes made from old farming tools, a reminder that anything could be transformed with enough love and courage. And if anyone asked how a billionaire heiress and a poor farmer had changed the face of American agriculture, the answer could be found in the simple truth they'd discovered together. Real wealth grows best in fertile soil, nurtured by honest hearts and willing hands.